our second speaker for the afternoon session, Christoph. Christoph, we were interacting not directly, but in spirit, I would say. Well, because right after the release of the Beijing AI Principles, Christoph has already noticed the efforts from China, and Christoph told me that in many of his talks, he was comparing Beijing AI Principles with the rest of the world to see the consensus and the uniqueness, which we appreciate very much. Christoph, as you may know, that at Technical University of Munich, that they have an Institute of AI Ethics, which is one of the first efforts along this line in the world. So we've been interacting with Christoph in many cases, especially his lunch together with other founding members on the Global AI Ethics Consortium during the pandemics. So I think that's really essential exploration that we can do together. And as a founding member of this Global AI Ethics Consortium, BAAI is also would like to contribute our efforts to the world. And thank you for Christoph, not only to invite us to the Global Consortium, but also to agree to speaking here. And I cannot wait for his talk on AI and sustainability. Thank you, Christoph.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Yi, for this kind invitation to speak here and for this kind introduction. So let me share my screen. So before speaking about the AI and sustainability in the proper sense, I will give some remarks on the institute that you just mentioned. So here at Technical University of Munich, we have founded a new institute, the Institute for Ethics in Artificial Intelligence. It was actually just launched last year. And so far our mission is to ask not just what should be possible in AI, but to ensure that as many people as possible benefit from the rewards of AI. And we work in cooperation with these different disciplines. So both the technical disciplines as well as humanities and social sciences to generate guidelines for concrete AI systems for the future. And we also provide a platform for cooperation between industry and academia. And for this end, we have research projects from several sources, funded projects that we fund ourselves, as well as externally funded projects. And the particular thing about our institute is that, as I said, in all our research groups, we have a principal investigator from the technical side, as well as one from the social sciences or humanities side. And that's something I think what makes our institute most peculiar. Just briefly, these are some of our research clusters, and AI and sustainability is actually one of our key clusters here, as well as these are some of our research highlights so that you get an overview. We have projects in the areas ranging from autonomous driving and ethics to medical ethics and AI, to online ethics, as well as trust in machine learning, for example, and a number of others. And as you just mentioned, Yi, our Global AI Ethics Consortium, that is an initiative we just launched, and which in the broad sense also has to do with sustainability. We have set up a network to coordinate and promote independent academic efforts for designing ethical rules to use AI in a responsible way against COVID and other pandemics. And these are indeed our partners from around the world. And I'm proud to say that GAIEC is one of ours. As well as Adrian, by the way, who will be speaking later. Now about AI and sustainability. Of course, this is a very broad topic, and the number of efforts that can be mentioned here. And in this field, we have several projects already underway. And some of them you might not immediately notice, or that might not come to your mind. For example, we have a very large project now starting about AI for Earth observation. And Earth observation can be used for a number of purposes, but the important thing for us is it also has ethical ramifications. And these we address in this project, which are, for example, data protection and privacy, fairness and equality, for example, about how the data are being used that are being collected by Earth observation, as well as questions of data portability. And as I said before, as in all our project here, we closely work together with the people from the engineering in order to create tools for the ethical use of certain AI technologies here, for example, for providing feedback dynamics for water supply systems in slum areas, and also for expanding public planning capacities in these areas in an inexpensive way to eventually improve water supply. So we are addressing potential bias of the data, and we are also addressing the question, how might these data be misused by different actors? Here, you have already mentioned the AI for the sustainable development goals, which I just present briefly here. And some of these, it can be clustered into these three areas: society, economy, and environment. And in many of these, AI can play a role. Actually, it will be in the near future hard to say in which part does AI not play a role. So I would just, for limiting myself to some of the areas. Yes, this is again an overview of the SDGs. For the lack of time, I will not go into this again. So AI can be used, for example, in the protection of endangered species. Here, devices like, for example, camera traps might be used to identify which species live in certain habitats, and collect these data together and process them. We already seeing a number of efforts around the world for creating trap databases, and these are quite interesting to see. Also, via deep learning, make use of these data in a way that helps to protect these species. Sorry. AI can be used in a broad sense to revolutionize mobility. And if we're not just talking about convenience here and better mobility, but also about sustainability in the broad sense, for example, reducing CO2 emissions globally. The transportation sector amounts for a quarter of this energy worldwide. And so in the context of both highly automated and autonomous driving, as well as smart cities in general, there's an enormous potential to reduce emissions, to reduce traffic and congestions, and to generally aim for a more efficient and environmentally friendly transport through a number of innovations here. And of course, also in predicting food shortages, there are a number of ways how quantitative modeling processes by ways of algorithm can calculate food security or shortages in real time, and predicting these, enabling early warning systems with predetermined finances to prevent these crises is a way that AI can, in many ways, help to address these questions, which go down to sustainability and ethics in the broad sense. And of course, in farm productivity, AI can help farmers to analyze in real time, for example, weather conditions, temperatures, water usage, or soil conditions, improving harvest quality and accuracy. And AI can be used to create seasonal forecasting models to improve agricultural accuracy. So here a number of ways where AI can be of help. as well as robotics, which is already being used in a number of factories, for example, but also in other areas. We will see them in the future to make recycling more efficient and accurate, and reducing contamination and health hazards to human workers. However, this should always be said, this is not just a one-side story. As I like to say, AI will not fly without ethics. We have ethical challenges as well as ethical benefits, certainly, but there are ethical challenges of these technologies. For example, when it comes to the accuracy of technical systems, these systems need to, in many ways, to be very, very precise in many areas of AI. They are vulnerable against cyber attacks. There's the question of how is this data being used? Where is privacy being endangered? And we have for example, in Europe, of course, the GDPR, but many ways in many areas around the globe, such as also addressed in the Beijing Principles, these questions are addressed. And so in order to use ethics in AI in a responsible way, there are a number of things that need to be considered. For example, about fairness of these data and the use of these data, but the explainability of these data, or what does the system actually do? How does it come to these results, at least in a general way, due to the black box character of these systems, obviously. There's the question of how much transparency do we need, and in what way do we need it, for what data. And finally, the question of auditability is one that we also are working on in our institute, but which many companies, for example, are interested in. What is the accountability that they will have to provide for in case something goes wrong, and how will this be auditable? So, and to this end, we have seen a number of efforts around the globe, not least in Europe, in China, and in the US, which came to a number of principles for an ethical AI, which also are relevant for using AI for sustainability matters. And while these are the 5 principles that are used both by the AI for People, which also Effie was working with us, but also by the European high-level expert group for AI. And while some of these are very general, and for reasons of time, I don't want to go into all these. The 5th one, explicability or explainability, as it's sometimes called, is a very key principle that also here in areas of sustainability will be an important one, since this is a new challenge that we face with AI. And a number of efforts around the globe are addressing this question, which is an interdisciplinary question between the technical disciplines. So there are computer science researchers working on explainable AI, but there are also ethicists and other social scientists working on them. And other principles, just briefly mentioned the OECD principles on AI adopted last year. And again, they are calling for more accountability and fairness in these. We have the IEEE, which has launched this initiative for ethically aligned design, which is quite an interesting framework that can be used freely, and that is available to also eventually audit AI systems. They have set up this program, which has just been launched. And I think this is important to see if you are setting up an AI system for promoting sustainability, you will eventually also need to have some program in place or some certificate in order to ensure that some ethical challenges are met. I was a part a couple of years ago in the German Ethics Committee for Autonomous Driving, which came up with a number of rules for the ethical use of AI. And one of these was a rule that said, basically, you must not discriminate between potential victims, so passengers on the street, which might be hit in this famous example by AI. Should you drive to the left and save that elderly person, or save a younger person to the right? And I think this is quite important to see that AI in many areas will have to be fair. It will, of course, data security issues must be met, data bias must be met, and explainable AI can be met. Here I've just mentioned a number of tools that are already available by companies for addressing these, at least in a very general way. Of course, there will be more improvements, what we will see and what we will have to arrive at is to improve the trust in these systems. And whether it comes to autonomous driving, whether it comes to AI in healthcare, or the sustainable use of AI in the case, for example, of smart cities or of Earth observation or preserving endangered species, we will have to establish trust. Otherwise, people will just not use these systems. We will need abstract guidelines, but we will also need concrete ethical guidelines for certain AI systems, for specific systems. We will need more data to assess the algorithmic impact, and we will need to have tools for companies to follow these ethical frameworks and establish the trust. And so the general goal, I would say, is to meet societal acceptance and establish and make sure that people are using these for good ends. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Christoph, for a very nice talk that not only connect what we have in sustainable development with AI in a very tight way, but also the comparative study from many angles for the global AI ethical principles. Thank you so much. And now we thank you for the community who provided some questions. They have been listed in the chat so that every speaker can see. I think both of the questions are very interesting to have a discussion. I think in general, the question is not only for Christoph, but also for every speaker in here who want to have a reply. The first question is, how does, if someone on the video stream cannot see the questions, how does an AI to play its role in natural and historical heritage protection? How does AI really help to reconstruct the Notre Dame Cathedral? Is there any successful cases? Who would like to say something?
Yeah, I mean, in general, it's the question what you count as AI. But if you take it in the broad sense and include big data applications, which basically make use of lots of data and collect them together, there in the, as far as I'm not sure about this exact case, but in many cases of historical heritage protection, AI can really be quite helpful in the reconstruction. If you have some data available and you bring them together, for example, how exactly did the cathedral look like in this particular corner, for example, and AI can indeed calculate on the basis of limited data available and come up with suggestions here. But I mean, you are also asking about natural heritage protection. Yes, so this is, I mean, how would you protect endangered species? So I mentioned this example. It's basically about bringing together the existing data, and if you have if you make use of more data than you could before, then you can better predict where is actually a problem and where do you need to intervene with ranges in the wildlife with many measures, and so this is much about you making use of big data.
Thank you, Christoph, for your reply. And Effie?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention, again, it depends, as Christoph said, it depends on what you count under AI, but there is an interesting project, for example, the Venice time machine, where it's about digitizing archives, documents, and using analytics to reconstruct the past through those tools. It's a beautiful project beyond being a, from the engineering perspective, very interesting to be able to do that. And I think in Europe we have, this is just one of the part of a bigger project to digitalize and analyze the continent's history through also monuments, archives, and all of the things that manually would have been very difficult to do, but also visualizing it, it would be pretty difficult. So yes, the short answer, I guess, is, as Christoph said, yes, there are possibilities to use this to reconstruct or analyze and understand better our past and our heritage.
Thank you.
And also to predict risk to monuments. Because one thing is the past, the other is there. In many low resource settings, you have hundreds and thousands of heritage sites, but the staff to protect them, even simple fences and guards, are not there. So predicting risk to particular monuments and then tailoring resources accordingly for their protection.
Thank you so much, Amandeep. Now we have everyone to have comment on that. I would also like to add that my experience in China is that there are colleagues who is using UAVs and 3D reconstruction to reconstruct the very ancient buildings in China. And more than that is to, like what Effie says, that you gather together all the information on the web, and not only on the web, but maybe in the museum and bookstores, and then to digitalize all those information by using semantic information processing, knowledge representation, reasoning, and semantic web to link all the knowledge together for those heritage cases. That's something not just started now, but I guess when I was a PhD student, when we were working on semantic web, there are tries in Europe working on this. So our second question is also very interesting, that it's widely known that AI is capable of predicting people's political interests. For example, Cambridge Analytica utilized Facebook data to manipulate voters in verdicts. Does that powerful AI can ultimately provide people what they're only interested in, not isolate people from other information? Is there any guidelines or measures to prevent the trend that AI may interfere into people's way of seeing and treating this world? Oh, big question.
This is a great question. I think the first part of it, we already see this with news feeds. So news feeds use AI to present information to people and often isolate them from other conflicting points of view. So it's a big problem already. But whether apart from specific guidelines or platforms like Facebook, Twitter, etc., and apart from very high-level principles in terms of protection of human rights, are there any specific guidelines to address this? I think that's a gap. So the questioner has identified a gap. I mean, there needs to be work on this. So it's possible that you could even at a national scale or almost at a regional scale control the way people see and experience the world. And that's why, the importance of this centering within, to be able to have the agency over what is hitting your senses.
Thank you, Amandeep.
Maybe I can add just one comment, because we have seen just recently both Twitter as well as Facebook adding like something like warning notices to certain remarks, for example, by President Trump, and he was not amused about this. But this was also to some extent based on AI. And so, I mean, there are some efforts by social media platforms to do this.
Thank you. Effie?
I was going to mention that recent development actually myself with AI also being used as a filter at the same time that it has created the filter bubbles, as well, trying to filter out certain things. So I think, again, this is a very critical issue. I don't think we have done so exceptionally well in helping, not in practically speaking. In theory, I think we talk a lot again about how this is a problem and how we should fix it, which links me to the question to the further question in the chat. I think this is a problem typical to AI. We have quite a bit of theory about what we could do right and how we should do it right. But when it comes to actual practice, we have a gap in how exactly are we doing it. And I think this is one of the issues we still need to figure out in practical terms, because it is critical. I mean, for many of our democracies, this is a very big issue.
Thank you so much, Effie. In the interest of time, we'll have to move, but I do like the third question. Maybe we can go it quickly. Now, maybe I can ask one of the speaker to give a reply on that. So people love all the versions of ethical principles, but it's not really that powerful compared to with economic power and political power. So ethical power is not so powerful. So how should we to deal with this, or how can ethics make a real difference during the development of AI?
Yeah, maybe I can answer that question briefly, because I think there is a difference between AI and former technological waves. Both decision makers in companies as well as public institutions are becoming aware that many of the problems they face with AI are not merely technical problems, but they are ethical problems in a wide sense, or governance problems. They are problems of how much AI should we allow for, what kind of AI, and in what way should we allow AI for, what will people accept. And so I think in order to AI be used widely, you will need ethical guidelines. Otherwise, as I said, AI will not fly without ethics. So I believe ethics can really make a difference here, and this is to some extent reflected in the many efforts we have seen since last year in a very brief time about ethical guidelines for the use of AI. So I'm relatively optimistic here.